Hello and welcome to another episode of the ADHD Goals Podcast. I am your host, Laurence Pratt, and it is 2025. So, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast since the beginning, you will know that, first of all, the podcast has been going for over a year now, and I was too busy to mention a little happy birthday to the podcast. And as it's just turned 2025, I thought it would be a nice way to celebrate that fact and see in the new year with a very special podcast reflecting on the last year. So I have asked my trusty assistant, ChatGPT, to write some questions for me to answer. So I'm interviewing myself. I know that sounds ridiculous, but anyway, I couldn't get anybody else to do it for me. Coconut is too sleepy to do it. You can see him in the background if you are watching this on video. And you also might be able to see that I've taken the Christmas decorations down as well. That's what those baubles are behind me. But anyway, so today's episode is a look back on 2024, the first year of the podcast, and a little look at what lies ahead in 2025. So I hope that you are all well. You've all had a jolly nice Christmas and that you are ready and raring to go for brand new year. Let's start. So what have you got for me, ChatGPT? What inspired you to start the ADHD Goals Podcast a year ago? Well, it was back in December 2023. I left my old job. A while before that, I had realised that I'd got ADHD. And yeah, I had felt like I had burnt out basically, and I was no longer enjoying the work that I was doing. And I realised that I needed to do something about trying to understand my own ADHD and manage it in some way. But also I felt, call it a midlife crisis. I had a lot of other things that I wanted to do, projects that I wanted to get off the ground, try out, tick off a list, say. And I decided to give myself 12 months to figure out what I wanted to do, how I was going to manage my ADHD, and fall back in love with what I was doing. I'd always been a fan of podcasts myself, as any of my close friends will tell you. I do listen to them all the time. And I had thought that maybe doing a podcast would be something that I would quite enjoy doing. So I decided that I would give myself 12 months to try and get a load of projects off the ground and also manage my ADHD. And therefore, why didn't I do a podcast that followed that journey? So yeah, the ADHD Goals Podcast was born. It started off as the ADHD Entrepreneur Podcast. And I can't quite remember when that changed or why that changed, but it did. Question 2. How has hosting this podcast changed your perspective on ADHD and coaching? Well, interviewing lots of people, lots of professionals in the ADHD world has deepened my understanding of many different approaches to ADHD, also the far-reaching effects that it has and challenges it has on different people other than myself. It has broadened my understanding of ADHD and introduced me to lots of other ADHD coaches. In regards to ADHD coaching, it has introduced me to a lot of different ADHD coaches in some shape or form, and helped me to understand the many different ways in which ADHD coaching can help people all people with ADHD are different. And one of the advantages of ADHD specific coaching, or coaching with somebody who has ADHD and is an ADHD coach, is that they understand your perspective. If you're late diagnosed in your life, having somebody who understands what you're going through, the challenges that you're facing, can be quite a big moment in terms of validation. In different to traditional coaching, it can be helpful if the person coaching you understands how challenging some of the things that you might need to do in your coaching. It's quite helpful because you feel less judged if you do struggle, that they can help you work through it. Yeah, it has broadened my understanding of ADHD coaching, deepened it, and yeah, I think it's great. Question 3. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced during this year, and how did you overcome them? Well, definitely at some point I suffered with imposter syndrome. When I first started, the format of the podcast when I first started, it was just me. I can't remember how frequent the episodes were. They were a bit sporadic, and it was just me giving like a weekly update on things. But then I noticed that I would miss a few episodes and wouldn't record. And I certainly felt, why would anybody listen to what I had to say? And so I noticed that I was missing episodes, and that was a challenge. But then I went to the podcast show in London. Can't remember what it's exactly called right now, but I met some very interesting people there, and somebody recommended a platform where you can find podcast guests. And I had wanted to interview people, but I didn't know where I could find people. And that changed everything, really, because once I was interviewing people, I didn't feel so self-conscious about doing what I'm doing right now, which is just doing a solo episode. But that gave me a lot more confidence. And I found it very interesting to find out other people's stories. And yeah, I sort of built my confidence from there and overcame that challenge. And yeah, it became less daunting to do sort of mini bite-sized solo episodes where I just share bits of information. That was one challenge and how I overcame it. I suppose also focusing on one thing at a time. It's always something that I struggle with, and it's obviously very common for people with ADHD because of all the different ideas that we have. But yeah, finding ways to work on one thing at a time and see it through to the end. It's always a case of managing that, because there's always times when that gets harder. But yeah, that is also a challenge. Question 4. Can you share a moment episode that stands out as a highlight of your journey so far? In terms of episodes, certainly interviewing Johnny Nasta. The reason for that is because, as I explain in the episode, is that many years ago when I was starting, I was a co-founder of a company with a friend of mine. I didn't know what I was doing, and we started a digital agency, and I sort of learnt lots of things from a particular website and podcast, and one of the hosts was Johnny Nasta. And to think of the journey that I had come in my career, certainly from a sort of digital marketing, website design, in UX perspective, which was my previous career, to have an opportunity to speak to him, someone who had helped me. We didn't know that, but that was a big moment. It was like, wow, that was, yeah, it was, I mean, all the guests have been fantastic, but that was one guest that I knew of, I've known of for many years. That was a big thing. The second moment, which wasn't an episode of the podcast, but certainly qualifying as an ADHD coach with the great team at ADHD Works. That was obviously a fantastic experience, and meeting the fellow ADHD coaches within that community, very supportive. That was brilliant and continues to be very supportive. A great experience. Okay. Question 5. What influenced your decision to become a certified ADHD coach? After looking at getting an ADHD coach for myself and having some coaching and all the ADHD support materials that I had read over the last year or two, I began to realize that there was a lot of alignment with a lot of the workshop facilitation experience that I'd got in my previous career, and a lot of the advice about taking things one step at a time, breaking goals down into smaller steps is very much how, someone who, as an UX designer and working with design thinking methodologies, it's exactly the same process, really. Identify the challenges, ideate solutions, and then test those solutions and iterate to improve and optimize over time. It all matched up with everything that I'd been doing in my job, UX researcher and designer. So I felt that as somebody who conducts user interviews with people to find out challenges that they're having, and then work with teams to get alignment and create solutions together, I felt that if I could do some training in ADHD coaching, that would align with something I'd always wanted to do. I mean, one of my goals was to continue doing design thinking workshop facilitation with companies. And I mean, that has now developed a parallel arm in terms of going into businesses and organizations, creating solutions for helping people with ADHD create workplace accommodations. And yeah, that was basically what influenced my decision. I recognized a lot of the skill sets I had experience with, and I felt that being able to work with people who had ADHD or with people that were supporting people with ADHD gave me a lot more purpose or sense of value than what I was doing previously. It was really a eureka moment. Question 6, and this is under the personal growth and insights section. What personal insights or growth have you experienced through this journey? Far more aware of my own personal executive function challenges and how they present in my life. Yeah, so I am far more aware now of my own personal executive function challenges, and I'm a lot quicker to recognize when they are presenting themselves in my day-to-day life. And I've learned how to communicate those challenges and how those challenges are affecting me to the people around me, family, relationship, my girlfriend, anybody I'm working with. Being able to communicate, firstly, being able to recognize facing challenges, being able to verbalize that to myself, but then also to the people around me. It speeds up the ability to move through it, but it also helps the people around you understand what's going on and they can support you. Ruffle less feathers, I suppose. Question 7. Were there any unexpected lessons you learned about ADHD through hosting the podcast? I've written down passion and purpose. I'd expected I would thrive from doing lots of different things all at once, but realized that I needed something to align with a sense of purpose. When I started the podcast or the 12-month challenge to try a load of different side projects, I had expected that I would thrive by the variation that would bring. I thought that would be how I wanted to live my life, even though the conventional wisdom said you can't do everything. And so I was, in some respects, expecting to learn this lesson, but I was hoping that I wouldn't, because I still like the idea of having lots of plates spinning and being able to dip in and out. What I learned was that once you've got lots and lots of plates spinning, you haven't got the time to devote to any individual one, because to get a project to work in any meaningful way, you have to put some passion and purpose into it. Otherwise, unless it's a hobby, if it's a project that you want to do as a business, then you've got to put work into it. And you soon find out which of those side projects that don't have your full attention, and by attention I mean if they don't align with your passion or purpose, then you find out pretty quickly which ones you sort of resent spending any time on or avoid spending any time on. So that was the lesson I knew I was going to learn, but I resisted learning for a long time. But in doing so, and I have all the passion and purpose in the direction that I'm going now, it was a good lesson to learn. It was a valuable lesson to learn. Question 8. How has your understanding of your own ADHD evolved over the past year? I would say my understanding of it is, or how it has evolved is, it amazes me how simple yet complex ADHD is. And what I mean by that is it can be quite simple to explain to somebody what ADHD is and explain the effects of it. But yet it is so incredibly complex when for any one individual person to begin managing it, I suppose, because there's so many different... ADHD can be like peeling an onion. Is that the phrase? Where there's so many different layers folding over each other. And it's very interesting to see how one individual's experience of ADHD can be completely different to the next person's. So so that's what I mean by that, I think. It can be easy to explain to a neurotypical person what ADHD and the effects that it can have, but it can be quite complicated to then sort of go through and explain how ADHD manifests in an individual person compared to that individual person, and to understand why it's different. And I suppose that is because it becomes complicated psychologically from the point of view of everybody's individual life experiences, and how over a lifetime of having ADHD, your own individual life experiences affect and press all the ADHD buttons. And that means that your particular responses to certain things can be completely different to somebody else's. And so finding a way to understanding one individual's ADHD and finding the solutions with the tools for that person to move forward and thrive, it can be complicated at first, but it is very rewarding. But yeah, what was the original question? How's your understanding of it? Yeah, it's simple and flipping complicated. No, and it is simple yet complex. Okay. Next question. Impact and community. What feedback or impact from listeners has been the most meaningful to you? I can't necessarily say any one. I mean, anytime anybody gives any feedback, it is, what's the word? It's a surprise, really. I mean, the fact that people are listening at all makes me very proud. And if anybody has anything nice to say, that blows my mind. And it makes it all worthwhile. And people from time to time say nice things about it. And it certainly gives me motivation to keep doing it. because I'm learning from it, and if I can share any wisdom from the people that I interview, it's always good to hear what they have to say. And if I can share that with other people, then that's great. That's a crap answer. How has the ADHD Goals podcast contributed to building a community for people with ADHD? Well, ChatGPT, you've got me there, because I'm not entirely sure it has yet, but I am working on that. I'm working on launching community very soon, but we'll hear more about that later. What are some milestones or achievements that you're most proud of from the past year? The most important milestone is that I made it past a year, really, because that was the original goal. The original goal was to take a year to find out what I wanted to do. And the fact that I survived a year is one thing. And the other thing is I'm pretty sure I know what I want to continue doing. So that's the one milestone I wanted to achieve, and I have. Question 12. Reflecting on your initial goals, how well do you think you've met them? Well, I think I've just answered that question, but I wanted the time and space to figure out what I wanted to do, and I wanted to enjoy what I was doing, and I feel like I've achieved that. But there's still a way to go in order to make it fully sustainable. So yeah, there's still work to be done. And yeah, so looking ahead at 2025, question 13. What are your goals for the ADHD Goals podcast in 2025? Well, I definitely want to grow the audience. Hey, listeners, if you could share this with all your friends, but if not, 5-star reviews, and 5 stars and reviews really helps. But yeah, so that's one goal, grow the audience. I just want to continue interviewing interesting people and interesting ADHD experts. Very selfishly, I want to learn from other people, and this is a great way to do that. And yeah, hopefully I can share some useful information to people. So that's the goals for 2025 for the podcast. Question 14. How do you plan to further expand your reach and impact as an ADHD coach? Well, I am currently doing some further training for my ICF accreditation. That's a coaching accreditation. And I have been working on a tool. I don't know whether I've mentioned this on the podcast. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times on the podcast before. But I've been creating an ADHD coaching tool called the ADHD Canvas. And I've been using that with clients. And I want to make that more available. I feel that can be a very good, useful visual tool that I've borrowed the concept from the design thinking world from my previous career as a UX designer. And I think it's a very good way for coaches to collaborate with their clients, but also when you're raising awareness within organizations and businesses, it can be a very good tool to visualize and communicate ADHD and its challenges, and also how you can create actionable solutions to those. So that's very exciting. Question 15. Are there any new projects or directions you're excited to explore in the coming year? Well, I've just mentioned one of them. But the other one, which I'm currently working on online, is an online course, which I hope to launch by the end of January. I've been working very hard on that for a while. But yeah, I've been working very hard on that recently for quite some time. And yeah, I'm really sort of lighting the fire under myself and saying it will be available by the end of January. Please watch that space. And with that, that's when I will be also launching the community. Yeah, so that's 2 things, an online course and an online community. And also, I am currently talking with some businesses and organizations to sort of see what I can do by going in there to raise awareness of ADHD and how they can use those tools to provide better workplace accommodations. Yeah. I did a stand-up comedy course in October and November, and I did my very first stand-up comedy gigs, which was very nerve-wracking and exciting, but also quite useful in a practical sense of gearing myself up for. It's always useful to be able to present and speak publicly, so it has given me a bit more confidence to do that. But I may be working with some people to launch a comedy podcast. So yeah, watch this space on that. We're nearly there, guys. Oh no, ChatGPT, what have you done? Fun and unique questions. Yeah, I'll be the judge of that. Question 16. If you could send a message to yourself a year ago, what would it be? I would say keep exercising. It's really important to keep moving and exercising, no matter how. You don't have to boss it in the gym every day, but just keep, even if it's just going for a walk, just keep moving and getting that dopamine into your system whenever you can. Just try and maintain a regular routine. It's easily said, I know, but that would be the advice I would give to myself. And don't be afraid to ask for help and support. There have been times where I've sort of been reluctant to do that. Yeah, looking back, it's definitely worth it. And what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting a podcast or exploring a career pivot like you did? Well, if it's starting a podcast, I would say do it. And don't be worried about it being shit. Because at the end of the day, you will learn so much more and more quickly from having it out there than you will from it just being on the cutting room floor unfinished. I mean, there's one analogy that I like to use is if you're building a bridge and you want it to be perfect, you're building it out of bricks and this, that, and the other, and it's going to be a beautiful, structurally sound, amazing bridge. And then you get to 80% of the way through and you're not happy with it, or you run out of steam, then an unfinished bridge is useless. You can't get across it. It's far better to get across the river by any means possible. Put down a plank of wood across the river. It would probably be more of a stream, wouldn't it, in this case? But you will, get across to the other side and know what it's like to be on the other side. And you'll learn a lot more, and you can improve on it over time. So just don't be afraid to do that. I mean, I'm describing perfectionism or hyperachiever. So I would avoid that. Just try it and learn. You'll learn much more. Having said that, the question was exploring a career pivot like you did. I wouldn't necessarily recommend quitting your job like I did, because that can have very serious consequences. But I would maintain that advice in terms of testing ideas out. You don't have to leave your job to test whether you would enjoy a different career direction. It's called an MVP, a minimal viable product. That's the plank across the river that I explained. What's the quickest, cheapest? You can test whether or not A, you're going to enjoy doing it, or B, you're going to make any money from it. And learn from that. Don't wait forever and put it off for the right time. But then at the same time, don't make the leap until you've tested it. Is a clearer answer. What's the one thing about hosting a podcast that has surprised you the most? I guess how many people wanted to be on the show and interviewed on the show. That has been quite nice. Yeah, I've enjoyed doing it. I've really enjoyed doing it. I mean, it can be a pain in the ass to edit sometimes, and it can be quite stressful to get episodes out. But because there are lots of people that want to be interviewed, I can generally have a backlog of episodes ready to go out. That can mitigate that issue. The problem is when, because I'm do 2 episodes a week, and the 1 episode a week I do on my own, it's getting those out that's the problem, because I don't tend to record those in batches a lot. What was the question? Yeah, I don't know how that's relevant to the question. Anyway, closing reflections. Question 19. How do you feel now compared to when you first started this journey? I think I said this already, but I'm much clearer on the direction that I want to go in now for the foreseeable future. I'd like to make a career of ADHD coaching and continue doing the podcast. All the projects that I've sort of outlined, they all align to the same purpose. Yeah, and within doing this, I can do elements of all the other things that I had wanted to do before I started this 12 months ago. If you can remember, with doing things on Amazon KDP, I've learned, I always find that no matter how random a little side project is that you do, something sticks with you, and an element of that experience will inform something further down the lines. I do feel that this direction and this path that I'm on right now does incorporate so many of the things that I've taken enjoyment from in the past, and it kind of solidifies, it prevents me needing to look in different directions to keep things fresh and exciting. So yeah, so that's the thing about direction. I'm glad I made it for 12 months, and I now feel that I can keep on pushing now for as long as possible. Question 20, this is the last. What's one takeaway or piece of wisdom you'd like your audience to remember from this special episode? Well, I think one of the things that I have heard a lot from the people that I've interviewed, people I've spoken to, is that people with ADHD do tend to know what they, and I say this in air quotes, what they should be doing. It's just that we can't always get out of our own way, and we can get stuck. The one takeaway I see is to get some support from people who know what it's like, whether that is joining a community of people with ADHD, something that's relevant to you, whether that's geographically close to you or just aligns with the type of person you are. Get a coach, but just get some support and take it one step at a time, and try not to do it on your own, because that can be very easy to get stuck. But anyway, there we go. That's a wrap, guys. I'm very surprised if you're still listening. Anyway, thanks, guys, for listening. I'm pretty surprised if many of you are still listening to the end. Thank you so much for during 2024. I do hope that you continue listening in 2025. There's lots going on, and I can't wait to share that with you. I've got big plans for 2025, but just remember, take it one step at a time. And I will see you next time. Bye. Well, there we have it. Thank you so much for listening this far. If you want to hear more episodes, then please subscribe on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you use. It really helps to spread the word. So if you know anyone this episode could help, then please share it with your friends. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Instagram at ADHD_goals, and you can find me on Facebook too. If you want to get in touch with the show, then you can email me at hello@adhdgoals.co. And finally, if you're struggling to manage your ADHD and you would like me to be your coach, then please head over to my website and get in touch. Until next time, bye for now.